Dr. Dror Eydar, I mean, he was chosen to be our ambassador in Italy, and again, he's done some wonderful and blessed things. So, first of all, I'm again, I'm basing myself on the assumption that you can all see the sounds, to paraphrase a verse, and you can see, we can analyze what is going on. We can see the different voices. We can see what Israel is doing in that battlefield of voices and opinions. You know, I just mentioned an old Jewish expression to describe what is going on. I think that we all understand that what happened on the 7th of October is again a biblical event. It's colossal. I think it goes to the deep roots of the Jewish people. I think we also know, or rather we feel, intuitively we feel that there's a very strong connection, a fateful connection between the terrible year that we've just had and the current war that broke out in wake of the massacre of Simchat Torah, which is also called Shmini Atzeret, which is the 8th day. It's the Isru Chag of all the festivals, all the holidays of Tishrei, which is sort of the culmination of all the lofty, high holy days of Tishrei. I think the very root of our existence, you know, being happy with the Torah scroll. It's an intellectual rejoicing in learning, in Torah learning, and this, you know, some sort of a textual skyscraper, so to speak, which is age-old, since time immemorial as a Jewish people. Again, we're not only the people of the book, al-Kitab, as is written in the Quran, we are also the people of the books. And that's why, that is the moment when catastrophe hit us. At that moment, we all heard that voice that called us to wake up, a wake-up call. The war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and all the other enemies, including the international arena, legal international arena, and that again that is underway at the moment. Because first and foremost, first of all, the war is an internal one, meaning a national one. And before those external wars, there is a very deep conflict, again, not only against our brethren, but against those old conceptions that corrupted our minds for generations. So why don't we go back to the beginning, to Bereshit, to Genesis, and that is what we did in Simchat Torah. We started reading the book of Genesis. That is why I called the war of Genesis, the war of Bereshit, in one of my articles. I think the world aligned itself to what was happening. And I think even before talking about sovereignty, geographic sovereignty, let's talk about spiritual sovereignty. Let's talk about the day that we have to reformulate why we exist here. Let's go back to the Genesis, to the beginning that triggered our return to Zion. Why don't we once again re-encounter all those lofty ideas that pushed us to establish the Zionist movement? This will be the second war of independence. It will require of us to build another layer on top of the old infrastructure. And that's happening on our watch. We can also talk about the fact, you know, before the countdown and after, you know, until the 6th of October, you know, we had sort of an old calendar. From the 6th of October, we are in a new era. It's a new calendar. You know, we keep, you know, hearing those people from the old calendar that use the same terms, the same slogans, those same conceptions, if you will. The conception that said we want peace now at expense of the future, at expense of having a safe haven for generations. So I think this train of thought, that as if the Zionist movement had achieved its goals and it has completed its mission, I think already David Ben-Gurion, during the War of Independence, he already refuted that. Yes, the Yesha protected all the different communities, but our first War of Independence was actually a lofty mission, and I quote, it was for realizing Zionism, if not fully, but at least to have, again, to maintain those conditions that will protect us in the future. And he said the security is only a precondition for our existence, for our independence. The state of Israel's a special goal. I think every state has to ensure the welfare and security of its people. It's not the main thing. It's what David Ben-Gurion said. He said the state of Israel, first and foremost, is the redemption of the people of Israel and the ingathering of the nation. Yes, he used that very old phrase, Geula, redemption, even before World War II. And, Rabbi Kook, before World War I, Rabbi Kook wrote that the nation cannot suffice with that narrow cake. That is what he called the idea of that safe haven. And this is what he wrote. It's not just, an echo that, again, we had this very hated people is asking for a haven from its enemies, from its haters. And it's not only that, but again, we are a nation. We are a nation of light. We are a lion that is coming back to the inheritance of its forefathers. Meaning the cruelty of the Hamas terrorists and the terrible surprise. And again, national institutions were paralyzed for hours and exposed the citizens to terrible atrocities that we had suffered back in the time of our exiles. And it happened to people, by the way, who promoted peace activists who lived there on the border. I think that threat that we all felt on that day during those hours, and again having that connection to the festivals of Tishrei, and before that there was terrible rifts here in our society. I think it all converges to one point. I think it might lead to a great process of teshuvah, of repentance, and people are thinking about their identity, and they are rethinking their destiny, and they say to themselves, was this the meaning of the massacre? How are we Jewish? And they go back to their sources. They go back to that well, that rich well of generations, to Jacob, who wrestled with an angel because he wanted identity. So, but I'm not saying that the answer will be a religious one necessarily, not at all. But maybe it will be expressed through development. Again, through an assessment that maybe at the end of this historical introspection, the difference between the PA and Hamas is only in its capability. We've heard, seniors of the PA who are not willing to condemn the massacre. Not only that, worse, they justify it. I think the answer is, the self-denial with which we enveloped ourselves for an entire, generation, as if we could establish a European state with a universal language and leave behind that huge textual skyscraper and our origin and our sources. No, this is a time to go back to sources of hope and emunah. And I think we are kind of releasing from the terrible prison of inverted commas, as Nathan Altman said, all sorts of concepts that were so scoffed, were so mocked over time, and now we understand how truthful they are. Again, from this point of crisis that converged into the massacre of the 7th of October, some sort of historical dialectic, one can call it, I think from the very depth of our consciousness, somehow connected with the spirit of 1948, and it's blowing strongly now. I think you can hear it through, again, commands given by commanders and the words of prophecies of bereaved mothers who strengthen the soldiers and encourage the people. The spirit of Dvorah, the prophetess who gave courage to Barak, the commander of Israel during the time of King Yavin of Canaan. I think the backdrop of, again, the Song of Dvorah. She said all those communities without a wall were left behind. They were terrified of the Canaanites and they left, they ran away. And then she said, this all happened, and then it stopped until when? Until I, Dvorah, I arose. I, the mother of Israel, Dvorah. I infused the people with courage and strength. Yes, even back then, they needed Dvorah. They needed that matriarch, that prophetess, so that people won't be afraid of living in those rural communities, that they will feel secure. You know, we started with a new sort of calendar from the book of Genesis, from reading the book of Bereshit, and we have had to fight with all sorts of threats, contend with threats that we hadn't had before. And in the book of Genesis, we also got our name, Yisrael. It's actually the philosophical, historical book of the Jewish people that have been directing us for thousands of years. As is written, and Jacob was left alone, and a man fought with him until dawn. And he said, I will not let you go, only if you bless me. And he said, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, no longer will your name be Jacob, but Israel, because you have fought with angels, with God, and you have been victorious. This is the story of our nation. Our third patriarch said, I was all alone. I was left alone, just as you were alone. On your historical route, you will meet all sorts of people, and you'll sometimes have to deal with things on your own. And, you know, Jacob ran away because he stole, again, the blessing from Esau. And he had a dream about a ladder. But now, and he was in exile at Laban's house. And now when he goes back to his homeland, he once again faces death. Once again, people try to disinherit him from his inheritance. He was left across the river without his family. He is a Hebrew. He's on the one hand side of the river. Everybody else is on the other side. But if back then, you know, if the previous Jacob, who was an innocent man, one who dwelt in the tents and learned, if he had run away, you know, after he was educated at Laban's house and had to deal with a lot of perils, he no longer runs away. He fights his enemy. He faces his enemy. In the past, he ran away from his brother Esau, but now he faces the danger. Not only that, not only does he defeat the angel, but he forces the angel to bless him and give him the blessing of the land. And the assurance that this inheritance will be his and his descendants forever. And only then do we get our historical name, Yisrael, who has the Hebrew word of srara, which means power and control, to again reflect that Jacob fought an angel and was victorious. I think this experience requires of us to have faith, to be patient. We all need to have patience. We need to have patience towards those who have little faith. We also need compassion. Yes, compassion for the public. You know, people are afraid. People are confused. You know, we hear difficult rumors every single day, and while our soldiers are fighting, I think the narrative in the media wants to repress that great spirit that came into our lives. People are afraid, and we need patience and we need compassion. I think we are commanded not to double down. We have to encourage the people. We have to reinforce people. We have to encourage the spirit. We have to infuse courage and spirit into those soldiers. You know, in the midst of the Second World War, while the Nazis were standing at the gates of Palestine, the land of Israel, Alamein, and they were talking about a second Masada, Altman wrote words of prophecies in, again, his great poem, Simchat Anim. He said, oh, here comes the night. I think we should be rejoiced because the night of exile has passed. And now the dawn of independence is upon us. And he said, oh, brethren, we suddenly see a dawn after 1,000 years. And he said, in the straits, we have faith. And he said, rejoice again, oh Jacob, Israel, again, that was repressed for so long, was like a little worm and who never had peace, but he can still survive. I think we recall, not only did the Nazis halt at the gates of the land of Israel, but again, that battle in Alamein was a turning point in World War II, because just like, again, the war down south and up north is not only the war of the people of Israel. We're a light unto the nations. This is a war of the entire free world against a very age-old tyranny that has put a mask on top of it and has, brought down, so many of its victims. It has deceived so many of Western intellectuals, has blinded so many people, just like, so many blind people did not see the evil that was Hitler. Same happened. I spoke on Italian TV earlier today that we gave the book of books to the people, the Bible. We have to also teach the world how to fight evil. And I'm about to finish. I'm aware of the cynicism of my words. I'm aware of, again, voices that still reverberate, those old misconceptions, those before our new calendar of Genesis. And they say, oh, it is our fault. We want achievements now. We want to see results right now. Just like those days prior to the new calendar that started on the 7th of October. But if, something that we've maybe understood, and beyond, again, the very important issues that have come up in this conference, is that we have to understand that we cannot make do on our own, meaning we can't just close ourselves up in our own little sector and bubble. We need one another. But let us not be afraid of what seems to be something temporary, temporary cliche, because all the cliches were shattered as well. Because I ask each and every one of them that this spirit that I talked of, the spirit that people who were touched by the spirit, don't deny the spirit. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed of the spirit. Revive yourself, renew yourselves. Reinvent yourselves with the Spirit, and may you be reinforced. Psalms, the author of Psalms said that you revive yourself like the eagle. We are like the phoenix that rises from the ashes of the 7th of October, the ashes of the kibbutzim around Gaza. We will arise from those ashes, and we're going back. We infuse ourselves with the spirit of the youth. We are retaliating, and we are building yet another layer and another episode in this wonderful enterprise that is called Israel. There is hope for the future.